right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So, man, free agency's kicking off in just a couple of days here, right? Monday, noon, legal tampering, it opens up. There's so many players that make sense for the Jets. Man, with all the cap space we have, I am freaking fired up. Of course, they actually have to go out and execute and bring in these good players, but the opportunity is right in front of the Jets' face. It's right there. But in this one, I wanted to talk a little bit about Derek Carr because over the last 24-ish hours, I've just been, messing around doing like the quarterback carousel, just trying to get like a better picture on what is realistic and what could happen, right? Rodgers returning to Pittsburgh, Malik Willis, Arizona Cardinals. Could Willis make sense for Cleveland? What's going on with Kirk Cousins? Because there's frankly a lot of names, right? Factor in Tua, factor in Geno, factor in Kyler. Then you got all those young quarterbacks that we constantly hear being talked about, right? The Anthony Richardsons, the Tanner McKees. Are these guys going to be traded? Not to mention, the older possible trade targets, Davis Mills, Jacoby Brissett, Mac Jones, right? It's a massive carousel. I mean, look at how many teams need quarterbacks. Like, there's going to be a lot of movement here. And so, again, I just messing around. I've been, trying to picture different quarterbacks with different teams. But I kept coming back to Derek Carr here, right? And I really want to make these 2 points surrounding Carr. The hidden connection to the New York Jets, and also a major factor that I think Derek Carr maybe has to consider, and I haven't really heard it being talked about anywhere else. So the first point, we've talked a lot about this. The Jets showed heavy interest in Derek Carr back in the day. Derek Carr has recently talked about, his love for the Jets, love for Jets fans and everything. And with the amount of cap space that we have, we could afford to bring Derek Carr into the fold. Now, the Jets went out and, again, something that we talked about a lot, we hired Bill Musgrave, quarterback coach, when Derek Carr had his best season of his career with the Raiders. So you have that familiar face. You have that familiarity between quarterback and quarterback coach. Obviously, massive. The Jets have continued to roll out young OC after young OC, young quarterback coach after young quarterback coach. The Jets have pivoted massively. I would say, I would actually argue it's a complete 180 compared to what we've had in the past, where we've added 50 plus years of experience between Frank Reich and Bill Musgrave. Again, you're factoring in Musgrave actually worked and had a ton of success with Carr. And then it hit me when I was thinking about the meetings, and I remember that picture got leaked with Derek Carr at the dinner table with Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas. There were all those, rumors saying that the Jets really liked Derek and Derek really liked the Jets, and David Carr was on the NFL Network talking about how well the meeting went, and Derek having a ton of respect for Robert Saleh at the time. The Jets obviously, had the money. It was right there. You kind of felt like it was on the 1 yard line, but the Jets wanted Rodgers more. So they kind of told Carr, hey, we're going to wait for Rodgers and his decision, and that was a drawn-out process. But there was another team that offseason that had interest in Derek Carr, where he went out, he met with the owner, with the head coach. It was the Carolina Panthers, led by Frank Reich. And so I went back and I found a cool interview with Frank Reich talking about his level of interest in Derek Carr, him talking about his game, him as a player, him as a leader. And there was heavy interest there from Carolina's side. Now, obviously, Derek Carr, he had options and ultimately went to New Orleans and, got the big money deal. And I was trying to think, what separated, why New Orleans over the Jets and the Panthers? Again, we talked about the Jets wanting Rodgers, so why New Orleans over Carolina? I was trying to think of the reasons. New Orleans, again, made that move, the $40 million deal, $40 million on a yearly basis deal. And I went back and I looked at the Carolina Panthers cap situation. They were actually over the cap by $2 million that season. So it was, that's a difficult place to be. I know teams can move money around, restructure contracts and whatnot, but I remember the Panthers kind of being listed as like the third option for Derek Carr because of the financial restrictions at that current time. And it's kind of ironic, right? Because he does end up with the New Orleans Saints, a team that is notorious for constantly pushing money into the future, worrying about it later. And kind of the theory is, okay, as the cap continues to rise from a percentage standpoint, the contracts aren't going to hit us as hard. So let's just keep on kicking the can down the road if we envision these players continuing to play for us. So, and ultimately, the downfall of that strategy is letting really good young players that are time to be extended walk, because you can't do it. But you kind of keep the window open for as long as possible. But in any case, Mickey Loomis, New Orleans, they've been in that mode for a long time. Carolina, with at the time brand new owner David Tepper, I don't know if he would have been maybe down for something like that. So anyway, the point is here, not only did the Jets have interest in Carr, and Carr had interest in the Jets, and we know Musgrave and Carr worked together, and that relationship was flat out awesome, and they had a ton of success on the field together early in Carr's career with the Raiders when he didn't really have that much help around him. And then there's the connection to Frank Reich having that heavy interest. And you can point to something direct, something apparent that could have been the deterrent for why Carr did not sign there. It wasn't like him and Frank didn't get along, or the meeting sucked, or Carr didn't feel like it was the right fit, or the Panthers didn't feel like it was the right fit. You can point to that cap situation and say, hey, maybe this was the holdup. Maybe this is the reason why it didn't get done. Last quick point here. There's a lot of people that are hesitant with Derek Carr because he's a year removed from football. You can spin that negatively. You can spin it positively. I mean, some of the positive arguments are he's a year removed. He's completely refreshed. He's 100% healthy. The shoulder has had time to heal. He can enter training camp with no limitations. He is not, his body hasn't taken hits in, 12 plus months. That is a massive deal. Massive deal. We've heard players talk about it over and over about if they have maybe an injury and they get done with their rehab early and they're able to really rest and recharge their body, they're fully at a full-time go by the time the next season starts. So you can definitely spin it like that, right? Maybe Carr is rejuvenated a little bit. Now, of course, the negative spin is he's not playing football. Is he a little bit rusty? The onboarding process might take a little bit longer. But I guess, you know what? Phillip Rivers was 43, 44 years old, and he's starting games late into the season. He was just picked up. I mean, how many years removed from football was Phillip Rivers? And he just comes in and he's spraying the football all around. I mean, if Phillip Rivers can do it, I definitely think Derek Carr can do it. I wonder what the interest level in Derek Carr would be now compared to next offseason. I would imagine it would be a little bit lower, right? When we're factoring in the next year's quarterback class and everything. And you got to imagine too, there's not going to be as many quarterback needy teams next offseason. And with Derek Carr being 2 years removed from football, I don't know. All of a sudden, I think the stock of Derek Carr, the thought of Derek Carr goes backwards a little bit, right? Where it's just okay, now we're really trying to project. We really don't know what we're going to be getting into here. Yeah, from practice standpoint, offensive scheme, getting people lined up, getting people in the right position, breaking down a defense, all that stuff is fine. But from a physical standpoint, 2 years removed from football at the quarterback position, to me at least, is a lot different than 1 year removed. So I wonder, is Carr maybe looking at this decision? And by all indications, I don't think he's unhappy not playing. He does the podcast with his brother. Obviously, he's well off. I mean, he's doing his thing, family, this and that. But I wonder if maybe Derek is looking at the situation saying, if I want to unretire, this is the offseason to do it, where you do have actually a few teams that really make a lot of sense. So I'm wondering here, how realistic is this whole Derek Carr thing? Because again, I'm going through the carousel. I'm trying to find, okay, what's the best situation for Geno? What's the best situation for Malik? What's the best situation for, take your pick, Tua, Kirk? There's only so many slots. And you got to factor, whether we like the guys or we don't like the guys, or they're fantastic or they're bust. Nussmeier, Aller, Ty Simpson, Mendoza, all these guys, they're going to be holding roster spots. They're going to be coming in and holding roster spots. So there's only so many seats at the table. Who's going to be left out? I wonder, could Derek Carr be looking at this saying, I have a real opportunity to unretire, potentially land in a good situation. I don't know if I could ever do this moving forward, this could be my, not necessarily last chance, but maybe last chance to cash in or maybe strike while the iron's hot. And you have a team in the Jets who has money, who has an offensive coordinator that really likes and respects him, that's been connected and has met with Derek Carr before in the past, a team that has a quarterback coach that really knows Derek. I wonder, and also another reason why this kind of, it really got me thinking about the whole Derek Carr thing is all of the buzz surrounding Kyler Murray with Minnesota. I know there was the report from Mike Garafolo about the Jets doing their homework on Tua, but Tua to me just doesn't really fit the Frank Reich offense. Maybe I'm dead wrong on it, and that's the guy that they end up going with, but I kind of feel like it's gonna be someone. Regardless, the Jets need to add multiple quarterbacks. So I think, by the way, it's really, we talked about this in the Jacoby Brissett video. I think it's really important for the Jets to actually add someone before free agency opens up, to where you actually have a quarterback on the roster if it comes up in free agency negotiations with players, especially wide receivers and left guard, offensive pieces. And in the event that your first, second, third, fourth option fly off the board, right? Say San Francisco says Mac Jones not for sale, Davis Mills not for sale, Kyler signs elsewhere, Kirk says I don't want to go, Malik goes to the Cardinals. Now all of a sudden we're looking around. Tanner McKee, Connor Hughes, his report is right, and the Eagles want a second or a third round pick for Tanner McKee. I'm not doing that. All of a sudden the Jets are looking around saying, okay, well, it's like Tua or Flacco or Mariota. I think it's important to land against someone that knows Frank Reich and his offense before this thing kicks off, just so we have that security fallback option. And there's the two guys that come to mind. Jacoby Brissett, who has been heavily linked to trades. The report basically said the Cardinals are looking for a decent day 3 pick. You got to imagine that the Cardinals, if that news is coming out, the Cardinals, that news is probably coming out from Arizona. So if that news is saying decent day 3 pick, you could probably get him for a 6th or 7th, or maybe a 7th this year and a future 6th or something. Bottom line, not much compensation. Or Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton's not going to cost hardly anything to go out and bring in for a trade. So I look at those two guys as potential options to get secured before free agency. Or I guess you could bring back Tyrod Taylor too, but he doesn't have the relationship with Frank Reich. Why? And by the way, why is that important? Why does there need to be chemistry? These guys are all professionals. I think a lot of people maybe say, well, why does it have to be someone that specifically has worked with Reich? I think with the Jets having, all these new offensive coaches coming in, again, new OC, new quarterback coach, Seth Ryan's now added to the mix, new tight end coach, along with all the new coaches on defense, but specifically on offense. If you're bringing someone in at quarterback and he doesn't know Reich, he doesn't know his tendencies, he doesn't know play calling tendencies, he doesn't know the offensive system like that, hasn't maybe worked with the Bill Musgrave, you're looking at the on-ramp, right? The onboarding process is just going to take a little bit longer. A good frame for context, if you make a defensive scheme change, like if you swap out your defensive coordinator, it probably takes you a month into the NFL season to fully get accustomed to it. 4 weeks in to regular season to adjust to a defensive scheme change. If you have a defensive scheme change and an offensive scheme change with new coaches on both sides of the football, I think it's imperative that you actually get players in the building that can be an extension of the coaching staff to, again, help the others, that can pick up things quickly and really move forward. I think that's why we constantly see reports surrounding Alex Anzalone to the Jets. He knows Aaron Glenn, loves Aaron Glenn. Glenn loves him. We need a linebacker. We have money to pay. And most importantly, Glenn is going to be calling the defense this upcoming season. I think Glenn is going to want to have some continuity with the player that he's going to be rattling plays in, right? Who's going to be wearing the green dot? If Alex Anzalone signed, it's going to be him. You don't want to have everything set up and the Jets are getting these good players and Carl Dunbar's doing his thing, but there's communication problems, or Jamie and Sherwood and Glenn aren't on the same page, or you have, you bring in a safety, you bring in a linebacker, you bring in that green dot, and maybe he's not the best at communicating, and that could cost you a game or two. As much as it's important for Glenn to get his guys on defense, it's equally, if not more important, for Frank Reich to get his guys offensively. So could it be Derek Carr? Could it be Derek Carr? I think it's real. Now, if we got reports, saying that Kyler was heavily interested in the Jets and this and that, I don't know if my mind would have jumped to Derek. Or if Mac Jones was being floated out there like, oh, keep it. Mac Jones has several suitors. San Francisco's listening to offers. Kind of like how it is with Max Crosby, right? You feel like it's on the precipice of Max is on the precipice of being traded. You don't really get that sense with Davis Mills or Tanner McKee or Mac Jones or really any of these. I would say the one that's most likely to be traded is probably Jacoby Brissett. But, if you're Arizona, you can argue we're moving on from Kyler. We got to have a quarterback on the roster to at least start free agency off. Maybe we're going to wait a couple days. What happens if Malik signs with Miami? We cut Kyler. We traded Brissett. Now we're looking at Jimmy G, who we've been linked with as our day one starting quarterback. No, Jets, you wait a week. We're going to figure out our quarterback position first, and then we'll get back to you on trading Brissett. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, go Jets.